role you've ever played in your entire life?
You know, you had asked me that earlier, and I thought, what was it? And then the name of a character came to mind, and then I had to look it up just to remember what the name of the show was. I played a character, I think it was the 8th grade, in this melodrama, this satirical melodrama, I think written in the 70s, called The Wild Flowering of Chastity, or Chaste, C-H-A-S-T-E, across the stage. And I played a character named Sheriff Tinfoil. And so it was a very, there was the villain, who was a mustache twirling guy named Desmond Darkacre. The hero was called Terrence Trulung, and I was the sort of a hapless sheriff that was more than likely comic relief. So small enough to kind of, you know, wet my feet, but I never thought it was anything that I would pursue professionally.
Well, let's talk about, obviously a spark happened there when you did that role. Let's talk about perseverance. What was acting like for Jonathan Roumie before The Chosen?
Yeah, so I was working, as I mentioned, I was working in the film industry behind the scenes when I got out of college. I needed a job. And so when you go to art school, especially like schools that are private schools versus university systems, you don't always get a rounded approach to the business side of art. You actually have to go outside of certain schools to be able to find this. You're nourished as an artist in ways you normally wouldn't get in other schools, with a specificity that is often unmatched in more of the broader sense in universities and schools that don't have such specific programs. But you're sort of left with, when you graduate, wondering, what am I going to do with all this creative, you know, energy that I've spent 4 years developing, and how do I actually translate it to making a living? So I came out of school thinking, uh-oh, what am I going to do? And so through my network of friends, I eventually started working as a production assistant, or a PA, like a gopher, running around doing just all sorts of things, getting coffee, that sort of thing. And eventually, 2 years into doing this kind of work, I found work in an art department, working on music videos, building sets. I was called a set dresser, and I painted sets, and I worked on a lot of hip-hop videos in the late 90s that were pretty iconic at the time. And then I got my first job on a movie working in what they called the locations department. My job would be to go and essentially follow the crew around when we were filming, and make sure that, you know, if there was a scene with 500 extras, that there was a room that they were all hanging out in, and that room was maintained, and it was set up for whatever they needed. And so a couple of years into this kind of lifestyle, I thought, okay, I think I need to do something creative though. Like, this was good and it was interesting, it was new, but I didn't feel that this was the end of the line for me. It was just the beginning. And so I started pursuing voice acting. I had always, as a kid, I was a pretty good mimic. And
let's hear an example.
I was waiting for that. So I was going to say, anybody that had seen a conference I did a couple of months ago with Bishop Barron, was it Good News? It was Good News. And I should know this, right? There was a couple of times where we had met just before the conference, and he's a fan of The Simpsons, and I'm a fan of The Simpsons. And so the whole time during this conference, we were trading Homerisms, where he would say something, and I'd be like, "Why, you little?" And then I would say something, and he'd be like, "Why, you little?" And so that's a little bit of my Homer Simpson. That's what you get there for the.
For the older generation, you might recognize Marlon Brando from a few things that he may have done over the years, like The Godfather. I don't know. I'm saying.
Not going to ask you to do all of them, but how many could you do?
Oh, I don't know. There was a lot. So to get back to the how I sort of tied it together, while I was doing these first couple of production jobs, first few years, I could do impressions. There was a show on MTV at the time called Celebrity Deathmatch. Anybody remember Celebrity Deathmatch? Yeah. So I wrote a letter when people used to write letters to the casting director of that show saying, hey, I do impressions. Could I audition for the show? And 2 months later, she wrote me back saying, hey, there's a phone number. It's like a hotline. Call into this number. Leave your best impression. It was probably my Brando impression. And we'll call you if we're interested. And she did. And I ended up working on that show for 3 seasons, doing about 25 different voices, 25, 30 different voices over 3 seasons. So that sort of started me on my interest in pursuing acting as at least a side vocation. And then that same casting director asked me if I wanted to audition. This is after a couple of seasons now. I was kind of getting a little more confidence. And she said, you know, I've got this audition for an on-camera commercial for the Video Music Awards of that year. This is like in 2000 or 2001. And she's like, are you interested in that? And I thought, well, I'll try it. And so I went to this audition. I'd never auditioned for anything on camera before, and they basically they welcome you into the room. There's a bunch of people with clipboards and looking at you, and you're like, what is this? You know, it feels like it feels like you're about to be lined up in a firing range, and like they kind of take shots at you or something. I thought, okay, let's see where this is going to go. And they said, okay, well here's a little script, and you know, just we'll give you a couple lines to do, and then just do some improvisation, and they sort of walk you through it. And then the clincher for me is they had like this like a radio, and they just played some music, and they said, okay, now just show us some of your dance moves. I said, I'm sorry, dance moves? Like, yeah, just give us some moves. And I was painfully shy, and I'm like, okay, thank you. We'll call you. Okay. And I couldn't run out of there fast enough. And I'm like, that is the worst way to interview for a job in the history of job interviews. And then I ended up booking it. And I'm like, what are you doing? What does this mean? And so that was the first thing I ever auditioned for. And then I booked it, and I thought, maybe God's got this plan. Like, does he want me to be an actor? Like, what? So it was piecemeal. The long road, to answer your question, it was a very sort of piecemeal for many years until I moved to LA, and then it was piecemeal for several more years, for 8 years, except now, once I left Los Angeles, I didn't have the stability of this, my main source of income, which at the time was then as a location scout. So I sort of traveled up the ladder of this industry as a location scout. I became a location manager, and it was a good job. It was a good living. But once I started working as an actor, I realized I'm called to something bigger or more creative, or something that utilizes the gifts that God clearly gave me. And I had sort of turned aside the interest in pursuing 2 other artistic gifts he had given me, which was that as an illustrator, as I mentioned, and I was also a musician. And so I didn't do either of those. And then the third time I thought, well, God gave me this gift as an actor. Maybe I shouldn't turn it away. Maybe I should do something with it and pursue it at least as a hobby and see if I'm any good at it.
Did you ever want to give up?
Once I decided that I would do this for a living, no. And then it got really, really hard in LA. And I didn't want to give it up, but I felt God was bringing me to this place of trial to such a degree that I didn't quite know if I had misheard him or misunderstood what the call was on my life. And so I got to a place where I woke up one Saturday in May 5 years ago, and a few people may have heard this story, where I was completely broke. Did I just lose my mic?
I think you did.
Hello?
There you are.
We're back. And we're back.
Literally the voice of God.
Yeah. So I woke up completely broke. I had 20 bucks in my pocket. I had enough food to last the day. And at that time I was juggling 6 or 7 different side gigs, and I hadn't worked in like 2 or 3 weeks. And so I didn't know where my next check was coming from. And the only thing I thought to do was to pray. So I got on my knees, I poured out my heart in front of my crucifix, and I just asked God. I just said, did I get this wrong? Like, you brought me here, you gave me these gifts. I thought I've been doing the thing that you wanted me to do, but look at where I am. So if I heard you wrong, well, show me where I need to go. And I trust you no matter what. And so now I'm going to give everything to you, and I surrender. Whatever control that I've tried to maintain on my life and when it came to my career, whatever I've strived to accomplish, I'm going to let go of the reins, let go of my expectations, and I'm going to let you completely be in the driver's seat. And I don't know what I'm going to eat tomorrow, but not up to me now. So take it from here. And I literally, for the first time in my life, I was kind of relieved, and I didn't have the anxiety that I had leading up to that conversation that morning, because I literally just gave it over to God. I knew there was nothing more that I could do, and I was really curious as to how this was all going to play out. I had no idea how I would